Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Funky Brain Podcast. My name is Dennis. This is my Funky Brain. We're going to have some fun today. Talk to a very inspiring woman. She's overcome some pretty serious stuff, including alcohol, drug abuse, and sexual abuse on a pretty high level. I'll let her tell you about some of that. She was only 15 years old. Her family moved into an apartment complex managed by former porn star John Holmes. And after grooming her, he began a sexual relationship with her, manipulating her with drugs and alcohol, and abusing her physically, emotionally, and prostituted her on the streets of Hollywood. And ultimately, she was able to escape and turn him over to the police. But today, she's a keynote speaker and author, a member of multiple organizations dedicated to abolishing sex trafficking and other types of abuse. Ms. Dawn Schiller. How are you doing today, Dawn?
Hey, good morning. How are you? Nice to be here.
I'm excited that you're here too. I think you've been sober for what, 22 years, right?
22 years, July 22nd.
Can you share with us, share with our listeners a little about your story, what it was like, what happened, what it's like now, like some of the stuff that you've been through and were able to overcome to become that beautiful, awesome woman that we see here today?
Well, that's such a sweet introduction. Thank you so much, Dennis. I appreciate really that you're doing this type of podcast really for folks who are struggling out there. We all need to hear some kind of hope and enlightenment in this time, right? Like especially, not that we didn't need it before, but I think COVID is like a real new challenge for all of us. And all of us, especially who are committed to sobriety and recovery and, and living life, the best life that we can today. It's about, pivot was the term before, but I really appreciate that podcasts and things like this and virtual meetings are being available for folks, so our resources have been cut off on one end, but they've been expanded on another. And I think that that's the good news. That's the glass half full and not half empty, right? As you mentioned, my story was really rough in the beginning. Since this is a drug and alcohol, and I have shared my story of addiction and recovery before many times of alcoholism and addiction. And, I grew up initially, my father was a Vietnam vet, and I grew up in a small town in New Jersey, but my father was really disturbed from Vietnam, and he was an alcoholic. He was definitely an army alcoholic, drinking with the soldiers kind of guy. And Vietnam really did a lot to him. He moved us down to Florida and then really pretty much abandoned us. In that neighborhood that he left us, it was pretty tough. It was a really rough area. There was a lot of racial violence. And before anybody even understood it, and we're talking about the 70s. And so, it was about being pushed out of the city into these impoverished suburbs and folks really fighting and being miserable about, being othered and marginalized. And so there was a lot of anger and resentments on the streets that I grew up in. And there was a lot of fighting. And I think that my mom had to work 3 jobs just to keep us, so she wasn't there. So essentially we were latchkey kids and just trying not to get beat up or, get our lunch money stolen. And so, it seemed like in my experience that my neighborhood and who I was in my neighborhood, I segued right to the folks that were using to escape their environment. So the pot was, we had a place called Sherry's Corner where we hung out, and everybody like smoked weed and got loaded. And, I think at the time, and I don't know if anybody has a reference on this, but, Quaaludes were a big thing. So anybody could score a Quaalude. That was a big deal. But that was a means of escape. And I realized that, today, I realize now, many years later, that drugs and alcohol were medication for me. They were a way of coping and to deal with the pain that I was living with. I mean, we were in fear of getting beat up or having to fight. And as a kid, I remember 10 years old, and a girl that I thought was a really dear friend ended up jumping me and beating the crap out of me as I was walking my dog. That was the kind of fear. And so I essentially, in my neighborhood, I had to learn how to fight. I had no idea how to fight. Who at 10 years old, 11, 12 years old, 13 years old, even knows this kind of thing, or even deserves to know that kind of thing. But that was the toughness that I had to live with. Anyway, my father comes back and I'm 15 and he divorces my mother and says, listen, I'm going to California. You want to come with us? So my sister and I said yes, and she's 14. And we kind of camp because we're homeless. We camp all the way over to California, pick up a hitchhiker in Colorado who says, hey, if you take me all the way to Glendale, California, I'll see if my girlfriend will let you sleep, let you crash at her place until we can, until you get on your feet. And so my dad was like, yeah, cool. And the thing about this at the time, I mean, there's like always so many complex things happening in people's lives. There's never any one this happened, and then this happened. There's always multiple people, multiple stories from people that come in and that influence us. And as kids, my dad, because he was a Vietnam vet, he had also experienced some debilitating Agent Orange effects and had lost his nose completely off of his face. So he was literally like a mummy bandaged. So I had a lot of compassion for my disabled father who had, experienced this disability from the war. But I also erased at the time the fact that he had abandoned us and was an alcoholic and was really self-serving in a lot of ways. It didn't matter to me because I thought I had idolized him. So that kind of set me up, and coming from a really bad neighborhood, it kind of set me up to be really vulnerable for any other predator that was out there. And I talk about this all the time in my work in anti-violence, anti-trafficking. I talk about what, situations that create the perfect quote unquote victim for somebody who's, praying for someone like that. And I walked in to this lady who's the hitchhiker's girlfriend's, complex with my father. She gave us permission to stay there. And turns out that John Holmes was the manager of that complex. So at nighttime, he was what they called the king of porn. And in the daytime, he was the manager of this little tiny apartment complex in Glendale, California. We didn't know, I didn't know anything about porn at the time. Like, even though I came from a rough neighborhood, I mean, it was the 70s. You don't have the internet then. Like, maybe there was a circulating really old Playboy book, magazine that kind of traveled around, but mostly I liked Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin, so that wasn't anywhere near my radar. So I was very inexperienced and very naive in a lot of ways. But he kind of weaseled his way in. And what I didn't realize was, because of my situation of my past and my vulnerabilities, and the fact that I was already, a pretty constant weed smoker, was that, I was a perfect target for somebody who had ill intent. And he was a predator who, although he could technically, be with any woman he wanted, he preyed on me as a 15-year-old by grooming me for about 6 months. And then finally, stepped in and pretended to be my boyfriend. He didn't care, and I, in my mind, and my father was slowly pulling away. So that transition happened so fast. It's kind of like a blip in my mind. But the point about drugs and alcohol with that is that he became the supplier. So John Holmes became the supplier of all the marijuana. And so anytime that because my father smoked too, and one of the things my father would say to me was like, oh my gosh, you can roll a really good joint. Like, what a great kid you are. And to me, that was like high praise, right? For somebody who had been missing their father figure out of their life, who had seen him as a hero, military hero, etc. Wrapping that up, it really was pretty quick that John Holmes took the place of my father. He started waking me up for school. He did all these things that are inappropriate. He was 32 years old too, by the way. And, and nobody said anything. It was just a bizarre thing. Nobody in this apartment complex said anything. He made obvious passes at me, but they weren't blatant. So this is the idea of a predator. Anyway, he pushed my father out, kind of basically. He ended up becoming very controlling, manipulative. And pretty soon I was his what I thought was his girlfriend, which was not true. Obviously it was not true. There was such a great power differential, but in my mind, I thought it was real. And he set me up in an apartment, in a little garage, like apartment unit, which was really just kind of like a hallway between two garages. And I thought, oh wow, this is my first apartment. Isn't this great? And I had entered the 10th grade, but I ended up, he kind of forced me to leave the 10th grade because he was very jealous. He would just start being very controlling. And he was very controlling of the drugs. My father eventually kind of segued out and left and said, hey, well, I guess you're on your own. And I had turned 16. And so in my dad's mind, because he hadn't been in our lives for a long time, and and he saw that I moved into that garage place, he says, well, I guess you want to stay. And he just basically gave me $20 and said, good luck. And left me, which again, he's the guy that I idolized, but he wasn't a good father, So at that point, I'm 16 years old, and John Holmes basically has control of where I live because he's the manager of the apartment complex, and he's, making sure I stay there. He's bringing me all the food. He's making sure, he's giving me some odd jobs to clean around, but at the same time, he's having his way with me, and he's bringing in, marijuana, and he would bring in alcohol because he always had like a bottle. It was like a big thing of whiskey was a big deal to him, but he was always in control of it. That didn't mean that I didn't need it. That didn't mean that I didn't crave it, because I did. It was something I already arrived with, and I had this, it was my medicine. So if things in life didn't make sense, or if they were hurtful or painful, like I was experiencing with John, it wasn't right. I knew it wasn't right. It was hurtful and painful. I was completely, I had no power in my own life. But with the drugs and alcohol, that kind of made it like, okay, I don't have to think about it, and so I relied heavily on that. It wasn't long before he started bringing in cocaine and, had me start, what I know today is called labor trafficking. If you are manipulated into selling drugs, that's essentially called labor trafficking today. And so, we're learning a lot more today about how to find language for abuses that happened in the past. So that, just essentially to get that through, John became very violent. He was also in the beginning also very violent, but I never told anybody. He would yank my hair or elbow me in the ribs. And, at times when I thought that I could say something or have a personality, he would shoot me down, and sometimes shoot me down physically. If I didn't follow directions, he wouldn't show up with food, and I felt abandoned for days. And then I became very, sorry. And, I didn't mean to hurt your feeling, all of those things. He became embroiled with a lot of dealers. Like I said, he was, I was driving with him. I was wrapping bindles. I was going with him, and he would tell me what I was allowed to use. If he was in control, it was enough to be addicted, but it wasn't enough to go overboard because he had to be in control of it. But clearly I was addicted because it was to me, in my mind at the time, it was the only thing that made me forget about the pain in my life, because there wasn't anything about this that was happy. I created these pockets, what I call pockets of happiness or joy around me. And I think that anybody who survives tough situations, that's what they do to get through. He eventually, started selling me on the streets of Hollywood. He was a master pimp. Another side of him that I didn't know, because I was never involved in the porn world, because I was actually his underage secret that lived in this little apartment complex in a suburb of Hollywood. So that's probably a saving grace, I think back, and I think that I wasn't embroiled in a lot of that. He got embroiled with some really bad people in Los Angeles that were organized crime folks who were very, very, very dangerous, and drugged me through sitting outside of houses that he made trades for. He sold me to one of these organized crime kingpins, Eddie Nash, once on Christmas Day and once on my birthday, which happens to fall 4 days after Christmas. But extremely dangerous situations. He threw me in the trunk of a car and took me to a brothel where I was like trapped by a woman who was, she was a madam, and she was so cruel. She was so cruel. And so I saw an underworld that was really dark, really, really dark. And anytime at that time, I was so controlled by the drugs too, that anytime I was given a little small amount, to me, it was thank you from the bottom of my heart that I can escape this. So on the night of July 1st, 1981, 4 people were bludgeoned to death, and one of them was bludgeoned so badly that she never recovered, fully. And on Wonderland Avenue, which was a house that we brought drugs in. I always sat outside. I never went inside, which is another thing, because he was so jealous. He had to control me so much that again, maybe was a saving grace. But he did, they were purportedly bludgeoned to death by the organized crime kingpin, Eddie Nash, that he did sell me to. So he didn't quite protect me. There wasn't anything about protection. It was all self-serving. Whatever worked best for him is really what he was doing. He wasn't doing anything that worked for me at all. The people were murdered. We went on the run, and I thought he was going to be okay. I guess in my mind still at the time, I was 20 years old by this time. So I had been with him going on 5.5 years. And we went on the run and ended up back in Florida, and wanted by the FBI, wanted by just about everybody, and wanted by organized crime. So there were contracts out on us, and me only because I was associated with him. You know, we were laying low for a while, and then he got the bright idea that that we needed more money, and he was going to sell me on the beach. I always tried to run. I always tried to run from him. It was something because I never wanted to be sold. I mean, it was never anything I wanted to do. So I would cry and beg and plead. And then if I could find an opening, I would try to run. And I've written about that in my book several times on what happened on those occasions. But this last time, he was selling me on the beach of Florida. He wanted to do it again. And I said, please don't, please, I can't. And I saw the door had a crack in it. I ran for the door. I made it downstairs to the pool area where there was a snack bar. And the folks at this hotel, they thought of us as the kind of like the nice couple. And we had assumed names. They didn't know this side of us or the history of being on the run from the murders. He ran down after me, grabbed me by my hair, and beat me in front of everyone and drug me back upstairs. This was the first time anybody ever witnessed him, any good people, I should say, witnessed him hit me publicly. So it was the next morning, and that same group of people banged on the door. They waited for him to leave, and they said, get your things, you're coming with us. And they found a safe house for me. And from there, I called my family, and from my family, FBI, everybody was waiting at my family's to hear from them. The minute you contact friends and family, they trace you. So what happened was they sent my brother down, and I met my brother in a park, and I had told them where John was, and I gave him up to the police, and they extradited him. It turns out that I am friends with those law enforcement agencies officers today. One of them, Tom Lang, is quite well known for high-profile cases, Wonderland being one of them, and then also O.J. Simpson being another one. And he's written a book as well. But they told me that there was about 8 contracts out on us, that if I didn't do something to separate myself from him, then I would probably end up dead. So at this time you think, okay, freedom. Oh my gosh, I'm away from this horrible person. But I am not doing drugs. I blamed everything on drugs at the time, but it didn't stop me from drinking. It didn't mean I wasn't still addicted to some kind of mood altering substance that would make me, but I was really saying, no, absolutely no drugs. That's what caused it. But weed and alcohol was still okay. And so I still drank. And from there, I met back up with my father. And, this is part of a book that I haven't written yet, so I'm going to keep this one a little short, but ended up in Southeast Asia for about another 5.5 years. But my father and he bought a hotel and a bar, of course, on Phuket Island in Patong Beach, Thailand. And in that time that I hadn't seen him since he left me with John, I ended up in Southeast Asia, mostly because I was on the run. I knew that John was telling people that I was a snitch and that there was probably people still going to be after me. And I was afraid of being in my own country. So I drank with military. I drank with expats. I drank so much in Southeast Asia because there was so much pain from the trauma that I had gone through. And there was no counseling or healing sessions or, I'm in Southeast Asia in the early 80s. 1982 was the first year I got there. And, there's no 12-step recovery programs. I'm on an island off the Indian Ocean. And I have come with so much pain and a history of trauma. So I think I drank my way through Southeast Asia. And there was way more trauma, way more things happened because you just don't get well by removing yourself from the, what I call, the fist. John was the fist, There's so much more to go through. But my journey was that I ended up finally back in about 1987, back in the United States. I was really broken and lonely in Southeast Asia. I was so disenfranchised from anything that I felt was who I was. I was lost and alone and scared and didn't speak the languages many times, didn't understand the culture. I mean, I was definitely an outsider in an outside world. So that said, I made it back to the United States, and again, still just drinking. But and I tried to have what, quote unquote, I thought, and I made it back in '87, and I came back to Los Angeles, thinking I was going to confront John because I'd heard that he was in the hospital dying of AIDS. And I didn't quite make it, but in 1988, I was back in Los Angeles, and I was feeling like, okay, I didn't have to hide anymore because he had passed away. But I was still drinking on a daily. I tried to have a normal life. I tried to work in the legal field. I managed my drinking, right? So I would drink in the evenings and I would drink on the weekends, but during work, I never drank because that was supposed to be okay. Well, it didn't last. And, and I still never had any therapy. I still never had any kind of recognition about what addiction was, even though it was all around me. People that came into my life were also alcoholics. And, because we like company, I ended up being in a relationship with another alcoholic. And that ended very tragically when they committed suicide. And I had no foundation at that time. And the really interesting thing is I had tried to get sober 6 months before that happened, but it didn't stick because I just didn't really work. I wasn't very serious about it, I don't think. I think I just wanted to, I don't know, but I was curious. But what happened at that point, I was absolutely shattered. I had no healing. I had, and all the memories and the trauma triggers and everything from John and from, growing up in a rough neighborhood and from escaping and being on the run basically in Southeast Asia for so many years and encountering so many other, crazy things and bizarre people and mean people, that I was just overwhelmed and I was done. I was done with life. I was pretty much done with life. And I gave up. And pretty soon people were coming into my life that had more than alcohol because I just let anybody in. Sure, come in. I didn't care. And they were vultures. And looking back in this, sober lens that I have now, I can see how they all just wanted, something from me so that they could get high and continue their addiction. And it didn't take long before somebody put a needle in my arm because I didn't care. I just didn't care. And that was 4 years. And my bottom was in living in a junkyard. I was homeless for those 4 years. I had spent time, in parks, in food lines, in abandoned cars. And my last stop was in this junkyard on the coast of Northern California. And just wanting to die, waiting to die. I couldn't find enough drugs or alcohol to kill me. It just but that was my only goal in life at that time. I had such a horrible, horrible, horrible life in my view, that still brought me so much pain, and I didn't know how to get out of it. Miracles happen. And literally, this is the most bizarre story. In my mind, it's the most bizarre story. But because this junkyard was home to other transient folks like me, homeless folks like me, little encampments here and there, I was at the gate of this junkyard one day, and I just couldn't figure out what to do. And I was probably just in a numb state, and the car pulls up, and a woman lets out one of the girls that was also living on at the junkyard. And she looks at me and she said, "Do I know you?" And I said, no, because I didn't speak to people anymore. I was legitimately I was a shadow figure, if you want to have a phrase for it. And she says, "Well, I just dropped your friend off from an AA meeting, and I'll be back tomorrow. And if you want to go, I'll be here." And I never, ever in a million years thought that I would do it. But, I packed up my bottle of tequila, like a good alcoholic would, took a few slugs, had the bottle in my bag, and, met her the next morning. I don't know why I did, but I did. And I just actually spoke to that woman this morning. We are dear friends to this day. Yes. So yes, very much adore her. And I was literally drunk for the first 2 weeks. That was the weekend of the 4th of July. And then July 22nd was the day I finally committed to sobriety. From that moment on, doors started to open. Drug and alcohol counseling began to happen. Suddenly the drug and alcohol counselor that I was seeing, plus I was going regularly to meetings. It was a small town in, Northern California on the coast. So it was just pretty much a conglomerate of everybody who was addicted to everything showed up. We didn't really kind of have a lot of restrictions because then you'd end up in a meeting by yourself pretty much. So you let everybody in, food addicts, whoever had a problem. And they listened and they loved me. And, they didn't care that I had such a horrible past. I was so ashamed and had so much remorse. But the drug and alcohol counselor really helped me work through a lot of PTSD issues with some very groundbreaking PSD techniques. And life began for me there. I started to really understand and unpack my past and understand, all of the elements that were kind of, that created who I was, what made me perfect as a victim, why I stayed, because, I was an addict. So that was a huge hook for me already. That was a huge way to manipulate somebody is, if you meet an addict and you've got the supply, you've got a slave pretty much. That's just the truth. So 22 years go by. I found a lot of things, like I said, finding the glass half full as opposed to half empty. Some of these things took a lot of years to get through. In the meantime, Hollywood is wanting to tell the story of these murders because they're pretty infamous here in Los Angeles, and nationally, even globally, I've had people. But so they wanted to retell it, and they hired a private investigator to find me. Because they knew I was alive. They knew I was a part of it because of arrest records. And they had a script that was just a mess. It was not anything close to the truth. And they said, look, we're going to do it with or without you. And by that time, I had just 2 years sobriety and I had a brand new baby. And I thought this was the worst thing that could happen to me. And I really just dug in. I dug into all of my wise counsel and the folks who said, we have to walk through this pain. You can't just escape and go use again. You've got to. And I thought, I can't relive this. And on the major screen where people are going to see this abuse, they're going to see that I'm with this guy who's like what I consider the most horrible guy on the planet. And they're going to see all kinds of things. And I said, well, I agreed to do it because I corrected the script in a lot of ways. I wanted it to be clear that people understood that I was being battered. And that it was a huge part of why he controlled me. And I had it dove me into being willing to go through that. All of a sudden I got all this extra therapy and support, from people who really said, you know what, you can do this and this can be healing. It didn't feel like it was going to be healing at first. And I know how when we go through things that are tough and painful, emotionally, it's a hard first step into that pain, but you just take the next step and you take the next step and you take the next step until you're through it. And then you're able to see the grace that's left behind and the people that you do get to help. It became empowering for me because in a way I was taking back my own voice that had been stolen from me for so many years. People were telling this story and they were telling it wrong. And to be honest with you, after the film Wonderland came out, they did cut out the part where I was being battered. And that was another very emotionally traumatizing thing for me. But I didn't give up. And I had my wise counsel. And I walked through the pain. And I really tried to see what's the best thing that I can do. What's the next right thing for me to do? I looked at my daughter who was, 3 at the time when the film came out. And I thought, if anybody ever sees this movie and that's all they know about my story, it's not going to be the same story. And I don't want her to know just that about her mom. So I embarked on learning how to write a memoir. And I didn't have a lot of experience at the time. I didn't have a lot of education, but I began writing. I began writing with writers. It took me about 6.5 years to get a pretty solid manuscript down and another couple of years to get it published. And in the meantime, I got my undergrad degree and et cetera. From that point, the book ended up being a real good way for me to continue giving back and doing service, turning my my junk into treasure, whatever the phrases are. There's multiple phrases for that, turning your mess into, what is it? You know the phrase, don't you?
Well, just using your past to make you stronger. I don't know that phrase specifically. I know a lot of them.
Turning your mess into a message. That's it. That's the one. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to say it, but I don't. We say we won't regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. That has been a reality for me. I really have to dig in and unpack my own past, not only to not feel the shame and remorse. It ended up helping people, but it was mostly for me. It was cathartic for me to be able to say, this is who I am. This is where I came from. I processed a lot of forgiveness. I let go of a lot of guilt that I didn't deserve. I mean, I was 15. I was told, oh, well, you're 15, you can handle it. But guess what? 15, you don't know what the hell you're doing. I'm sorry, just FYI. I have a daughter who's 20 now. 15, you don't know.
What a great story. I mean, but there's so many different things that you were talking about, and I was taking notes on some of them, but, using that pain and that darkness to grow into who you are today. And then one of the things you talked about, going into Asia and spending that 5 years there, but you can't run away. It's everywhere I go, there I am. And then that feeling the pain all the way through. It's so important for people to know. I love this story because we've all been dealt stuff, or we use whatever excuses we want to get sympathy or pity from somebody, but it keeps us sick, until we feel that pain all the way through. We used drugs and alcohol, and I had my own pain. Mine, I don't believe was as bad as yours or as dark as yours at all. But, to me, it's real. And then to a lot of people, whether it's people we talk to all the time, I'm sure you do too, but for somebody that they feel like they're fat or they're not good enough, or their parents didn't like them, or their friends in high school didn't like them. So they use those as excuses to drink or drug or numb out and not want to feel. But the thing is, and Buddha said this 2,500 years ago, 3 things can't be hidden long: the sun, the moon, and the truth. Yeah. And until we face that, whatever our pain is, we stay stuck and we can't grow and experience all that life has to offer. And it's hard. We talk about this all the time. It's it's not I just stopped drinking and then life was rainbows and unicorns. I stopped drinking and then I get a chance to get through all those things so I can get to the good stuff. But then while I'm doing that, other shitty stuff comes at me. And then but then along the way, I learned how to get through that stuff. But I'm going through a tough time now. It's been 17 years since I've been sober, and I'm going through one of the hardest periods of my life. But I have the tools. I have a coach and a mentor that, he inspires me every day. And when I wake up and I'm in some sadness, I write, I read, I exercise, I drink hot water, whatever it is, that's getting you through stuff. We learn these tools along the way. And then we get through it. And then we become somebody like you who's inspiring and powerful and reasonably happy.
The rewards for doing the hard work are immeasurable. And I think that's, when we talk about my accolades, I belong to so many organizations now. My undergrad degree, my book got published. I speak nationally, which during the time of COVID, I'm doing online now, but I speak nationally, and I've been invited to so many wonderful spaces. I consult with the Department of State, which who thought ever, running from the Wonderland murders, I was ever going to have clearance with the Department of State. But I do, and I consult and on anti-trafficking issues. We have better language to understand abuse and victimization and survivorship. Walking through the pain and having all these tools to help us get through it is real important, but the rewards are so amazing. Having my daughter in my life is amazing. At the moment, she's struggling with some health issues, but you know what? I have her in my life, and that's brilliant to me. I never thought, thinking back in that junkyard, that I would ever have a child, ever. I didn't think there was a hope for me, I ended up getting a teaching fellowship. I was awarded a teaching fellowship at Oregon State University for graduate school, which, is a lot of work, but I have a master's today, so it's, and it's all to continue and to do the next right thing, because I really believe that you have to have, your intentions have to be centered. You really have to do the next right thing. And the right thing is definitely specific for an individual, but it has to be right. And I mean that, and we know that by self-examination, you have to, you're always, self-reflexivity and looking in on yourself and saying, could I have done that better? Is there something I need to do to, to just change something that I did that was, out of step or maybe hurt someone's feelings, etc. And, you have to be constantly self-aware. And if you're not so that means you have to be present, right? But the rewards are so great. I don't know. I mean, I can only say that I have such good friends in my life. They're not out trying to get me. They're not out trying to put needles in my arms today. They're here to support me. They're here to support my daughter. I mean, I love more than I ever thought I could love, because the love before was broken. It was wrong. It was misdirected. And we're all human creatures who need to love. We need to bond with people, and that was my greatest, that was my greatest defect that was preyed upon, was my need to be loved and cared for. So I've had to learn how to do it, with your self-care tips that you just said. Those are the ways that we love ourselves, and we receive that in ourselves, like as caring and nurturing, and that we matter. A lot of the therapy that I did said, forgive the little girl, forgive that teenager, love that teenager, because that child never experienced and embraced a kindness that wasn't, with one hand out and the other hand ready with the knife. It was, so trust had to be built again. I wake up, I go to sleep at night, and I wake up, I could never sleep at night before. That was a huge problem for me. A lot of people come to me now mostly because of my book, and there's a lot of folks who struggle with trauma and trying to understand their place and their worth and their value in this world. The world changes on a daily, right? We're sitting here in COVID world now, and we have to be able to, there's a saying in Southeast Asia that I learned, it's called, and the Thai people say it so lovely. It's, and I won't repeat Thai because I'll probably butcher it, but it means to bend like the rice in the wind. That's like life on life's terms. That just is another way of saying it, that we need to say, oh, I stepped here yesterday, but I have to step here today. It's okay. We have to really just focus on, examining our fear and where that comes from and what's the core motivator for fear, and, just flip the switch. Yeah. I spent a lot of years, I remember sitting there and just whining and complaining in my first years. I did it for so long. I thought, and I was in groups of people who were just loving and listening, but I thought, oh my gosh, I'm so tired of saying the same thing over and over again. I have just repeated this, problem more times and in more ways than I could possibly imagine. And that's all I've done, was I've just reworded the same problem. I never got through it. So sometimes, things take a while to get through, and sometimes they happen quickly, sometimes slowly.
Pain is the great motivator. It's like, but if everything's going well, then why do I need to change? Right? So I need to be in enough pain. That's why everybody talks about the rock bottom stuff. But I don't know how to get through it. And I love what you were talking about. We just do the next right thing, and we have to take care of ourselves. But when we talk about the next right thing, I don't know how to get there from here, but I don't need to yet. I just have to do the next right thing. Sometimes the next right thing is like get some ice cream.
Right.
It's just like, what do I need to do right now? I need to take a shower or get dressed, because it's overwhelming. And most people fail in sobriety because it's overwhelming. We want that instant gratification. I don't understand what's going on right now. I'm full of fear, anger, insecurity, resentment, fill in the blank. And I don't know how to get beyond that. So if I drink, I don't have to worry about that right now. But now that I get sober, and this is the hard part about sobriety, there's no loopholes, right? So I can't just not drink, but I also, like all this other stuff, like I can't eat 2 pounds of chocolate either. And I can't watch porn, and I can't go shopping and spend money I don't have. And those are all distractions from feeling. When you were talking about, I need to feel that all the way through. I need to walk all the way through that pain to the other side, and then I grow. Right. And then when that problem or that fear or insecurity or whatever comes up again, I know I can get through it. Because I
And we
did.
can't walk through it. We can't like, do a mad dash through it either, because we want to get it over with, but we have to walk at its pace. And
Yeah.
that's where patience comes in, and just being in the moment and trusting the process. All of those things happen. And, you can't like, you would want to be to the other side. Like you were saying, we want to get through. People get overwhelmed. So they just want to rush through it because they don't want to feel it so hard. That's another aspect of walking through the pain, is just sometimes you have to be in it.
Sit in it. I know. And I have people call me. I had one of my clients texted me the other night, and she's like, am I feeling this pain, this sadness? Am I supposed to just sit in it? And I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. Because anything that you're going to do at that moment is going to distract you. And one of the things I talk about with the fear or the pain, the sadness, whatever it is that's coming through, heartache, grief, loss, as if it comes in, if it's like coming in one side, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes through my head, and then
Mm-hmm.
it's swirling around in there, and I process it. Whatever, walking through that. I love how you said that. I have to go through it at its pace. And then if I process it and feel it, it just kind of comes out the other side at some point. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. But if I don't, like what happens is it comes in, here comes the pain, here comes the fear, the insecurity. Then it just kind of sits in here. And if I don't process it, if I go drink or eat or smoke something or numb out somehow, then it doesn't come out the other side. It sits in there and swirls around, and it makes me sick, And so I have to feel it all the way through. But it's hard and overwhelming at first. And that's why most people fail in sobriety, is because, I'm going to stop drinking. I'm going to stop smoking weed. I'm going to stop snorting this or whatever it is. And then the next day, life kicks you in the balls. But you're like, I don't know how to feel that way. So I'm going to go drink because that's really painful. And it's hard.
Oh, yes. Yes. Well, this is Sir Rowan Feathergood, and he's being naughty.
Hi, Sir Rowan. Yeah, so tell us more about your book, or you have something else going on, and you're a coach too. So I was talking with Dawn earlier, and she's also a counselor for those that are dealing with sexual abuse or trafficking or any type of pain like that. I know she's well qualified. You can reach out to her if you're experiencing that type of pain, and she knows how to walk through that clearly because of everything she's been telling us.
Yeah, please reach out to me on my website. There's there's a space where you can just reach out for contact, and I'll get in contact with you. But my experience with sharing my story has been, this is part of the grace that I feel like, is that I had no idea it was going to help so many people, it was going to resonate with so many people. I just did it wrote it as honestly as I could. Again, my intentions were, I had to keep my intentions in check every time. I had to let go of the outcomes. I had no idea. This was my process. I didn't have an outcome. I thought this was going to be for my daughter. It was going to be a story. I was memorializing this, but it ended up getting published because it was the next right thing when I got to that point. And it worked out. And so a lot of people have been coming to me specifically when I have looked at my sobriety today. I have got to look at the trauma that I experienced as well. And I've got to look at the trauma from a female perspective because it's different. And I address those things because I had to in my own life. And I'm a member of many survivor groups. I've started many survivor groups, and we support each other in a lot of ways. But trauma and how we respond to today and how we stay sober today is connected, and we can't ignore it. And so really it's just it's a unique space that I get to help people with, and I think that's important to me. That's my next right space, I think, because I can speak to walking through trauma, and I can speak to, getting back on your feet. Things tend to trigger us and throw us way back with trauma, way back into the moment of abuse or pain, that we were powerless, we couldn't move, we were taken advantage of, we lost our voices. Those type of things resonate with us. I'm involved with, like I said, with the Department of State. I do trauma-informed care and advocacy, and I help them build programs around trauma-informed situations, victim-centered, trauma-informed, and survivor-led. So I also build leadership among survivors. And so I mentor in that capacity as well. I want folks to thrive. I feel like everybody should be empowered. Those that had their voices taken away have a lot to make up for. They have a lot to say, but it can't be debilitating, and it can't sabotage you. And a lot of times walking through trauma, I'm here to help anybody who wants to reach out and wants to have a chat, and we can work something out. I am working on my second book. My first book is this one. It's very earmarked. It's The Road Through Wonderland, Surviving John Holmes. It was published by Medallion Press and is available on Amazon or my website. If you want me to sign it, I have some here in my apartment that I sign for people if they want that. Some people do. And then also, so I'm working on my second book now. And, building the relationships here now that we're on COVID, the one-on-one, more virtual relationships. Part of the healing process for me has been in writing my memoir. I've been able to historicize my family dynamics, the things that happened, and also take responsibility for my actions when it was right to do so. It was so healing, like I said, and so cathartic to get that on paper. And whether or not, like I said, the intention of a published book or just having it for yourself or passing it down to your child is really important. So if that's something that you're interested in, I do one-on-one counseling. That's a part of the mentorship. Not everybody wants to do that. It is a process, but that's the stuff I work on.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's a tool. When we talk about all the tools in our toolbox, part of it is, getting that stuff out in any form, like that. Doing this podcast, for me, this is one of my tools that I use to help me heal too. It's like helping other people in some capacity. If somebody's driving down the road and they're thinking, I'm just tired of drinking, I want to maybe kill myself or my wife or my, something like, these are thoughts that go through our head as addicts, or practicing alcoholics or addicts. And if I can, have an interview right here and help a couple people along the way, or just that one person to stop being abusive to themselves or to their families, or just want to commit suicide, or just being depressed, that's really the goal here. We don't do this for the money. It's like, I just want to reach people. I want to reach people and not have to suffer the way that I did. And that's really ultimately the goal. And that's one of the tools. And, it's funny when we were talking about in the early sobriety, when we're going over the tools and the steps and everything, when I used to do a lot of AA, and they're like, well, we have to give back. We have to volunteer and be of service. And I'm like, I don't have time for that, but you create a life of service. And all of a sudden you realize, it's like when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, how can I help people today? That keeps me sober. It keeps me sane. It keeps me happy. And that's why I keep doing it. So clearly you're on that path as well. And I'm so grateful that we had this talk. Maybe we could do it again sometime.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, hopefully the journey is long and fruitful for, everybody who really takes these steps into, sobriety. Here's the thing. I know so many people too that feel like they're not going to be the same if they don't use, or they, if they don't, like they're going to change who they are because they've built this, they've been, managing alcoholics or addicts for a long time. And so their work depends, or their art depends on it. And the truth is, I was never more creative than I am sober. I mean, it's just amazing where you can go with your mind and your creativity and, and the opportunities. Like I always say, and this is a cliche that happens, that we say a lot in recovery, it's like, don't quit before the miracle. And I love that saying because it means, and when I sign my book, I also write that in there sometimes. So there's always light in the dark, even in the darkest places. Yeah. And I believe that. I mean, I have lived that, and I've lived that in some of the darkest places. And I can go back and look at these really dark spaces and say, you know what? I'm able to share that today because that matters to somebody who's going to be able to say they can walk out too. They can walk out of a bad situation as well.
Yeah. And I love that, it's like what you just said in the beginning of that was, am I going to be that same person? I can't give up my identity, but I didn't really like that person. And we say you only have to change one thing, and that's everything. And thank God, because if I go back and was to hold on to some of the old Dennis, that old sick, insecure, fearful, angry guy, it wouldn't serve me at all. Like, and I love how when they were like, if I would have written down what my life would look like, 17 years into sobriety, I would have sold myself way short. there's like definitely some things that I wish I had now or did differently or had this relationship or whatever it is. But look where I am. Like my life is incredible today, which is why there's nothing that a drink or a drug or any other type of mind altering substance is going to make better today.
Right. Right. And the funny thing is, the next right thing is not perfect. It's not the next perfect thing. It's just the next right thing. And with the information that you have at the moment, and and as honest as, and I know that you say a lot about honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, and I totally 100% believe in that. But with a lot of honesty, you look at what is the next right thing. And then if things change and it didn't work out the way you thought it should, there are graces there, and there are other ways to do the next right thing. It's complex, but it's very simple.
It is, yeah. Thank you so much, Donna. I really appreciate it. This has been such a great talk, and I know that you help a lot of people, and I'm grateful I had a chance to be part of it. Oh, and if somebody wants to get in touch with you, I know it's dawn-schiller.com.
Yes, please. Yeah, dawn-schiller.com, and just have a look at the website. Reach out to me. I'd love to have a chat with you.
Thanks again. And everybody, thanks for tuning in. And please reach out to Dawn if you're struggling with any type of issues that you think she can help you with. And until then, I hope you're having a great day out there. Enjoy the sunshine. All right, everybody, thanks again. I appreciate you tuning in to the Funky Brain Podcast. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now. So you can't think your way into a new way of acting. You have to act your way into a new way of thinking and being. Hi, I'm Dennis Berry, best-selling author, speaker, and life coach for addiction recovery. So many people are stuck in their addiction, whether it's like drugs or alcohol or food or shopping or sex or money, and they think they could just stop or try to figure it out on their own, but they don't change anything in their lives. Nothing changes if nothing changes. In order for change to happen, you have to change something. My clients will be like, oh, I'll stop tomorrow, or if this happens, then I stop, or someday I'll just give it up. And then they just sit around and think, and hope for different or better results, but it doesn't happen. You have to take action. Action most people aren't willing to take. People don't become willing until they're in enough pain, me included. And unfortunately, they wait, and time passes by. Even if you are willing, you don't even know where to begin. And that's where I come in. In my best-selling book, Funky Wisdom, A Practical Guide to Life, I talk about the how approach. How do I get sober? How do I stop doing drugs? How do I become healthier? How do I have more successful relationships? How do I become more financially successful? And the answer is how. Honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. I have to honestly admit that there's a problem. I have to honestly admit that things aren't going well and there needs to be changes. And then once I do that, the door opens and I become open to seeing new ways of living. And then I become willing to make those changes. You can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. That's why I'm here to help. And I've been working with clients for over 15 years and helping them get clean and sober and change their lives and achieve inner peace and success. If you or somebody you love is struggling and doesn't know where to begin and how to make those changes to get to where they need to be, give me a call. Not tomorrow or in a week from now when you are hungover and your life is falling apart. Call now. Start making that change today, and you'll be glad that you did. I'm sending you love and good vibes. Have a great day today.